Good evening, and a bright out evening it is, right? So the light is flooding in. So I was thinking over a few different ways of going about doing this video, because you can kind of dig into it as far and deep as you want, or you can look at it on the surface, make a judgment, and walk away, right? But I'll probably land somewhere on the rambly part a little bit, but I'll try not to, okay? Because I'll try and keep it relatively short. But what I'm going to be talking about is the Conor McGregor and Tucker Carlson interview, because it is fascinating. Not just the interview itself, right, but the response to it, and even some of the choices around it, right? So obviously the two of them met, I think, Tuesday, a few days ago anyway, and they had an interview. It was put up last night. It was made available for people to watch. It was about an hour long, but it was filmed inside of the Grand Freemasons Lodge in Dublin. Okay, so I said it in a video the other day, because I didn't realise it actually was in a Freemasons Lodge. I just seen the checker floor, and I said, look, people will probably jump to that conclusion, right? But those who read things symbolically, right? But it turns out it was in the Freemasons Lodge, so great. There it is for people, right? And the response to it's been fascinating. Obviously, everyone's response is different and nuanced to the degree in which they're responding. But you can kind of throw a blanket around some of the responses, or throw a tent around some of the responses, and encapsulate them into groups, right? Or responses that look the same. And I go with two, right? So one of the responses to this is that Conor McGregor is involved in some sort of revelation of the method sort of a thing, right? Which is playing people, but also showing them that you're playing them, right? Without being explicit about it. So showing them symbolically that your intentions are not on the up and up with people, right? But not saying it explicitly. So a strong response is that the Freemasons, this is a difficult one as well, right? Because we've come from over the years, the introduction of the internet and technology, right? Where YouTube was a gold mine for all of these, for new information, essentially, right? Which came in the form of video documentaries, and they covered a lot, right? So the Federal Reserve, international Jewry, the Bolshevik Revolution, what else is there? The Vatican, the Jesuits, right? The Knights Templar, all that sort of stuff. The Alex Jones documentaries about the Trilateral Commission, the Bilderberger groups, John Coleman's Committee of 300, right? There was great stuff done trying to capture the movements and shakers of these roundtable groups and networks and secret societies over the years, right? And I learned a lot from them, right, over the years. And I would imagine a lot of people did too. So there's probably a generation of people, or a group of people, who, when they see anything Freemason or Freemasonic, they'll have a knee-jerk response to it, which is conspiracy against people, right? And that's fine, and that's acceptable, because it's okay to see something like that and have question marks go off in your head, right? It's okay. The next question then would be, is that reaction a natural reaction, or is that reaction artificial, right? Because we'll go down the road of it being natural. Number one, Freemasons are heavily linked with, synonymous with England in the Irish mind, right? Synonymous with England. Old Boys Club, secret societies, the movers behind, from Irish people's perspectives anyway, a lot of chicanery in Ireland and underhandedness, right? It's very tied in with the Orange Order. So there's all that baggage that comes along with that, right? So that's something that needs to be highlighted, picked apart, and explored, because it's perfectly reasonable to want to question these things. But we'll go down the artificial road now. We won't. We'll hold off for a second, right? We'll deal with the reactions. We have people saying that the mise en scene, right? So the environment, the staging area, the choice to have it in the Masonic Hall is trumps all, right? It means that it poses serious questions to it, to the point where this is one of the reactions, that anything that he says is deemed irrelevant because he done the interview in the Freemasonic Hall. Okay, that's one response to it, or one reaction. Another reaction is the elevation of the message above the environment or the stage, right? That it doesn't matter if it was done in a Freemasonic Hall. The message that he has is what's important, right? And you can see there's two sides here that are trying to negate the other side's perspective, right? So never mind what's said. What's important is that it's in a Freemasonic Hall, therefore disqualified. No. What's important is the message, therefore the fact that it's in a Freemasonic Hall, disqualified. It doesn't matter, right? But the truth, not the truth, there's a synthesis that can be arrived at here. Because we can do more than one thing at any given time, okay? And we have been blessed with being Irish, but we've the blessing of being Irish and having the Irish mind, right? As crippled and distorted as that has become over our experience here, right? We've also had periods where it's been straight and edgy as a razor, right, and sharp. So we're more than capable of entertaining two thoughts at any one given time, without accepting either of them. We can entertain two or three different perspectives, or two or three different readings of a situation, and then put them aside to take on a fourth. We should be able to do this. We should be capable of doing this, right? So the fact that some people, and I've given it a little bit of time, right? A little bit of time. It's only yesterday, right? But it intrigued me to sit back and watch the responses and the reactions of some people. And I'm not going to name anyone because it doesn't really matter, right? That's not what it's about. But some people's reaction has been to go all in on this. And it's frustrating because these things need to be dealt with in conversation, really, okay? There's no point in texting or commenting underneath someone's thing saying, could you be more specific and give me your breakdown of how you arrived at this position, right? It's so long, or it would be so long, that it would just take up so much time, and you'd need to have just a conversation around it, because people are, as I said, doubling down and throwing their whole lot in with this, but they're offering very little in the way of an explanation as to why the way they are seeing things is correct and why the way they're seeing things should be accepted by other people. But it goes a little bit further than that, right? Because it's perfectly fine to go, hang on a second. Checkered floorboard. Freemasonic Lodge. But you're telling us that you're different than this government, who in their group photos are always on the checkered floorboard as well, right? But you're telling us you're different. Or has he even said that he's different, right? This is interesting. But it's getting a little bit more emotive. It has drawn something out of some people, because people all of a sudden are up on their high horse with this. And there's a bit of an arrogance to this. And the phrase popped into my head yesterday that a little knowledge is a dangerous thing, okay? Because you've people saying, oh, cop on now, and how are you not seeing this? And you must be blind, go and give your head a wobble. You haven't passed the test. This is all a psyop and you failed. But there's nothing in the way of rational argument following that. It's just, oh, how could you fail this, right? You're somehow subpar intellectually, or whatever the case is, for not grabbing this and for not arriving at the same spot I have arrived on, right? And that's fine, because there's a freezing point in this sort of a thing, right? Where you believe, right, that's the answer. That's the answer, and I need not look any further, right? I've arrived at the answer to all of the woes in the world, and I need not look any further, right? And anything outside of what I've arrived at is stupid stuff, right? And I sit here and I wait for everyone to catch up with me. But that's a part of a process, okay? That's a part of a process. At different points, so long as you continue to soak yourself in the wisdom and knowledge of other people, right? And greater minds than your own, hopefully, right? But to be learning from anyone who's beneath your own capability, in certain ways at least, right? But there's an emotional edginess and sharpness to people's reactions to this, and all of a sudden people who've been complimentary of each other, sharing each other's stuff, backing each other, speaking from the same hymn sheet, singing even from the same hymn sheet on 99% of issues, now all of a sudden there's a bit of a turn. So that piqued my curiosity, because it's okay to be frustrated because people aren't seeing what you're seeing, right? And that obviously means that it's important to you. But you can't start denigrating people for that, knowing full well, or at least you should know full well, that you could be wrong, or you might not have the full picture, right? That's where the arrogance comes in. You might not have a full hand of cards in your hand, right? You could be wrong on things. There might be things you're misunderstanding, or there might be one thing that could highlight something else for you that you're kind of writing off. Or the counter to that, or not even the counter to it, but there's an alternative to that as well, is that, and a few people have pointed this out, and it's great. It's really great, right? The fact that people are going, Freemason, question that. That's good stuff. That's good stuff. It means people are recognizing the symbolism involved in these really, really old societies, right? That have had a history and that have had an impact in Ireland and across the world, right? That's good stuff. That is a movement beyond which has not happened in Ireland in a long, long time, right? When you're growing up, you kind of hear things, you know, there's a room across there, there's an old closed down bar in there or whatever, right? And the judges and the solicitors and the top of the guards, they've their meetings and drinking there. You hear this kind of chat, right, growing up. But that kind of gets diluted away and people don't really pass that on, right? But that's the kind of lodge stuff that is being employed with that kind of talk, right? And it's important to understand the nature of this thing. And the alternative to people kind of just being a little bit presumptuous of knowing and having the full picture of things is that, and this is probably likely given some doubling down on people a day later, right? That they might be agitators, right? They could be sleepers. People who've inserted themselves into the Ireland nationalist movement, or if you want to call it, whatever you want to call it, right? The pro-Ireland part of politics, okay? Or pro-Irish people part of politics, whatever you want to call it. They've inserted themselves there. And on the surface of it, they look all above board. But this one issue seems to have rocked a lot of people. And now all of a sudden they're lashing out at others who've been on the same page as them, on the surface at least. Right? They're lashing out. It's all, everyone's pure stupid because everyone fell for this and I didn't, and therefore, like, unfollow me because you have a different opinion and you're reading the situation differently. Unfollow me because you're beneath me. Right? Keep an eye on these people. Keep an eye on these people. Right? See who retracts and comes back and says, yeah, look, this is how I arrived at my view. This is why I think my view is correct. And this is the learning I've had following it. That bolsters my view or that has made me question it. Keep an eye on that, right? Keep an eye on it. So, what have we got? We have everything is wrong because it's a Freemasons lodge, throw it all out. No, hang on a second. The message is more important, right? So, without getting into a history that none of us know loads about, right? We know bits and pieces, and much of what people would add would fall into the speculation or speculative category, or the conspiracy theory category, if you want. All conspiracy theory means, if it's not proven to be a factual thing, right, is an alternative perspective on something. That's what's after happening, right? And I hope people see that. So a conspiracy theory is like a criminal. You can be charged for a conspiracy theory. A conspiracy to commit a crime, right? With another person, that's a conspiracy. So the theory part of it is just having a different reading of the same information as somebody else. So looking at history and having a different reading of it than somebody else. That's now classed as a conspiracy theory, when all it is a difference of opinion, or a difference in understanding, or speculation about a shared set of information or facts, right? So that's what conspiracy theory has turned out to be. But without falling into the long-winded idea of this, I will say that we can accept two things. I'll stick with two things, right? So either Conor McGregor is part of the system that has Ireland in the situation that it's in, right? And this entity that is destroying Ireland and Western nations across the West, right? This entity knows that people will react to it at some point. So in order to stymie the development and the growth of an organic opposition to what's going on, every now and again they will throw out their leaders, right? Or they will throw out these false prophets who get out and try and harness the energy of a frustrated average people, right? They will try and harness that energy and derail it. Okay? And this is well known, right? It's also factual that this is true, right? So they've been known as gatekeepers, people who will maybe allow a certain bit of ground in terms of information sharing, but ultimately they're a vanguard against what's going on, really, right? So we're allowed to understand this much about it, but here's where we stop. Anything else beyond this is purely mad nut stuff, right? Shills, they're called now, right? So people that pretend that they're in support of a particular view while also trying to subvert and undermine the people who share that view, right? Shills is what they're called now. So we have that. So is Conor McGregor one of them? Let's make the case for it. He has been allowed to make so much money. He has been rubbing shoulders with probably some of the most influential people in terms of the businesses and corporations or whatever in that world, right? And he's got away with certain crimes, apparently, right? This is the argument, or this could be the argument, and he doesn't really care. You get into ad hominem things now, like people believe that they understand his motivation when he wakes up in the morning, which is silly, right? It's silly. You don't. It's silly. He's an egomaniac. He is blah blah blah, and he's only in this to try and keep himself out of jail, or he's only in this to boost his brand and make more money and stay relevant and all that kind of stuff, right? And you could even throw in that maybe the guards have more dirt on him and he's been blackmailed and he's standing in as a true nationalist hero to lead people astray, okay? There's nothing wrong with entertaining those conversations or entertaining those questions and following them honestly to see where you go, so long as you can be honest about it, right? So long as you're not jumping to conclusions or following faulty logic because you feel like you want it to be true, right? And also, if you cannot argue for the other side of the argument that you have, if you can't argue the opposing view to yours honestly and well, then there's holes, there's gaps and holes in your knowledge and in your understanding of a situation, okay? Because you can also make the argument that he is being honest. He sees what's happening in his homeland of Ireland. He doesn't like it. He understands his position and place in society and in the world, and he's hoping to use that. Because you can't hide away from it, really, can you? But he's hoping to use that in a way that will help the Irish people, help himself, help his family in his homeland of Ireland, right? And in so doing, he has met with Donald Trump, who happens to be in... The rubber has hit the road now, and we can clearly say, factually, that Donald Trump's rhetoric, his words, and his actions have positioned him as an opponent of the ideology, one of the dominant ideologies of the last 10 years, right? So the pronouns thing, the men can be women thing, and the whole nonsense that goes along with that, right? That white people need to atone for the sins of their father and therefore grant freedom of the land and the keys to the city to anybody who is not white, and whites need to accept a subservient position in society because something happened years and years ago in the white people's collective history, right? This sort of sick ideology that wants to bankrupt and keep in mediocrity all Western nations while funneling money into other nations, right, that are exerting a greater and greater influence over Western nations, right, and then destroying these nations demographically. So Donald Trump in action and in word is opposed to this. Conor McGregor in words is opposed to this. We can to a degree say in action, right, and we'll get to that. But in terms of him having a decision-making capacity or a decision-making role in Irish governance and in Ireland, we can't say that his actions are following his words, right? Personally, we can, because he has built homes for disadvantaged people, right? He has done that. So one of the things he objects to is the fact that Irish people are going without here and are not being looked after. And there's many homeless Irish people. So his actions have lined up with his words there, right? Conor McGregor has also met with Donald Trump on St. Patrick's Day in the White House at a time that is usually reserved for the leading politician of Ireland to go and meet with the American president. The leading politician of Ireland got demoted, if you can look at it that way, to the 12th of March. And Conor McGregor got the St. Patrick's Day slot. It's very symbolic. Very symbolic. And while meeting the Taoiseach of Ireland, the leading politician of Ireland, Trump referenced the fact that one of his favorite Irish people, if not the favorite, is Conor McGregor. Okay, so this is symbolic because Micheál Martin is advocating for that disgusting mentality and the total ongoing destruction of the Irish people in Ireland. Donald Trump is against that. Donald Trump looked like he elevated Conor McGregor over Micheál Martin, symbolically at least, and practically, right? In reality, he gave him the St. Patrick's Day, the Irish national holiday, regardless of what you might think of it, right? He gave that slot to Conor McGregor in the White House, for Conor McGregor to come and speak to the world, or speak to the Irish Americans about what's going on in Ireland, in their homeland, their ancestral homeland, right? And he done that. So you can stack the evidence that Conor McGregor is honest in what he's saying here. You can also, if you don't want to accept it, and if you still like the alternative that he's not, he's there to disrupt and destroy things and subvert the nationalist movement, right? You can play that if you want, but I need to see something substantial from you. I need to see something substantial, okay? Because you can just as well stack the evidence that it's the alternative, right? That he's actually being honest. It doesn't mean he's a hero and you need to follow him around with your nose up his arse. Like, it doesn't mean that. It just means you recognize what it is. That there's a man who looks like he is putting himself with whatever might he has, right, to the forefront, because that's what he's doing, of fighting for the existence, the self-preservation and the freedom for self-determination for the Irish people in their homeland. That's what he's doing. It's very easy to make the case that that is what he's doing. And if you don't like that, you want to accept that he's a disruptor and a subverter, you have to account for what he's been doing. And the account for that then will be, but sure, that's part of the plan, right? That, of course, they're going to look like they're on your side, right? And this is where it gets weird, right? Because you can't land definitively on one perspective. There's an unease and an unsatisfaction in not knowing, right? But that doesn't mean you grab onto whatever certainty you can catch a hold of. No. It means you have to sit back and watch, because that's the position you're in. We don't know in totality whether he's an honest guy or whether he is in there for disruption. We don't know. We can only have informed opinions, and we can only have our own discernment and judgment, and look at how we view it, what evidence we have to back that view, and be open to the fact that if counter evidence suggests something different, we will give that perspective equal footing, or the footing that it deserves relative to our own position. We have to do that. And people that are jumping the shark, so to speak, and going, look there, the whole thing is gone, and he was always here to do this and disrupt, therefore unfollow me because we're not on the same wavelength, man. Go on away now, right? Dishonest characters. Either dishonest characters or intellectually dishonest, right? But either way, there's a shakable foundation in these people, some people, right? If it applies, it applies. If it doesn't, you know yourself. There's a shakable logic and a shakable foundation of how they're assessing situations in these people, right? So, and here's another one, right? And this is why these things can get long-winded and they can go on for hours and hours, right? But I will try and capture it in this as well. What's going on in the world? Okay, can we all put our hands up and say, we don't know? We are in such slippery times that it's very, very hard to see who the good guys are, if indeed there is any, and who the bad guys are, if indeed there are any, right? Are they all here to be deceivers? Probably. A lot of them are, right? Are there obvious deceivers at play in their dogmatic and zealous following of particular perspectives? Of course there are, right? Of course they are. And it is nearly a given that it's their right to try and deceive you. Right? We won't get angry at them for that. Right? We will reserve that anger for our own foolishness if we buy into a lie from somebody. It's as simple as that. They have the God-given right, because they have freedom just as we do, right? To try and deceive you. Don't get angry at them for that. Recognize them for what they are and move on, right? So, if we look at the world, as I said earlier, there's a massive attempt to destroy, subvert, and annihilate the Western people. Call a spade, right? That's a given. So you would imagine then that of all of the Western people, that there might be a few good ones. That's a safe assumption to make, isn't it? That there might be a few good ones. And it's very, very questionable to me. People who refuse that or seem to be working on the premise that that's not a potential. Because surely if you see yourself as a good person, you have to assume that there are other good people out there, right? Among all strata of society, there can be good homeless people, there can be good billionaires, and there can be disgusting homeless people, and there can be even more disgusting billionaires, right? But it's not total. There's no one group or category of people that are 100% this way or that way, right? So there's people who have very little social power who are good people, and there's people who have significant social power who are good people. So we can understand that, right? So we can imagine then that there's a push to destroy Western people and enslave them to the point where you can use them for our excellence, if you want to call it that, our significant talents in certain fields, right? While also socially having them enslaved and threatened, right? That's the process that's underway. And there's a reaction to that good people are doing things to try and stop that, to try and reverse that, and to try and destroy those who are pushing ahead with that. So Conor McGregor might be one of those. We also understand as well, as I said, that there's an anticipation and a hopefulness in people that someone good with such a stature could rise and speak for the Irish people in their plight. And there's also the need to be on point about recognising a shill, right? A wolf in sheep's clothing being propped up. Of course. We should always keep our eyes open for that, but that doesn't mean being overly cynical to the point where anyone who steps forward is automatically a shill, and when the people demand a hero, we will supply one for them, right? The Albert Pike quote, Freemason quote, or quote from a Freemason, right? Yeah, sure, he said that, and is that applicable in times and some instances? Of course. But is it applicable in all instances? Of course not. Of course not. And here's where we need to be honest. If you're making these totality statements, right, your thinking is not clear. Your thinking is not clear, because there's always exceptions. And if you're not allowing for an exception, that's zealotry, right? That's pure dogmatism. You are not open to anything counter to what you're pushing or how you're seeing it. And people are falling into that. And it'll be interesting to see who clarifies things in the next few days or whatever the case is, right? So, is he a disruptor? We don't know. Is what he's saying coherent? Yeah. Is what he's saying consistent? Yeah. Is what he's saying clear? Absolutely. Now, are they congruent with his actions? They certainly appear to be. Judging on the company he's been keeping recently and their perspectives on things, is there a communion among that? Yeah, there is. So there's evidence to suggest that Conor McGregor is an honest person who has Ireland on his heart and is doing the best he can for Irish people, right? There's certainly evidence to suggest that. And you can't just bat that away or dismiss that away, okay? So, one last thing on the Freemasons, and I think that this is a really interesting thing. So, if we take, right, for the sake of a thought experiment, if we accept that Conor McGregor is a decent, honest person, and what he's saying he's doing is actually there his intentions. That's what he's doing. He's been honest about it. He says he has the backing from America, and he has backing from other countries, financial and moral and whatever you want, to overturn this rot that's enveloped Western society. If you wanted to make a statement, because people that are saying, oh, it's Freemasons and therefore all is corrupt and all is rotten with the whole interview, don't even listen to it. It's satanic, right? It's interesting. So you have to accept then that the Freemason side of it, at least, or whatever, is part of this battle. And if that part of it are not good for people, the Irish people, then those who are against what's going on that's not good for the Irish people should automatically be against the Freemasons, okay? So, with that being said, if you had someone who is against the centuries old, if not millennia old, corruption of Ireland, right? Wouldn't that be some claim to go and sit someone who's totally opposed to the order that is said to have been imposed by many hands, but Freemasons' hands along the way as well, of going and sitting someone in the Irish Grand Lodge, the second oldest lodge of Freemasonry in the world, right? And the oldest one that is, I think, actively still utilised. Is that not a case of sticking your flag in someone else's turf, right? That's a legitimate potential. Just as the other way, you can look at that and argue that case as well, but I need to hear something substantial from people instead of just trying to denigrate people for having a different opinion. How dare you? How dare you? And you know what as well? Leave these people out the pasture. Leave them scream in the dark on their own. If they're not willing to give you anything and they just want to look down their nose at you because you have a different perspective on things, off you go. There's no need to listen to these people anymore because they're zealots, right? Or they are antagonists. They are agents of the state who have been sleepers, right? You find them all over the place in nearly every country, right? And so I leave you with this as well. And this is a fascinating one. For me, anyway. Right? So, Manly Palmer Hall was a 33rd degree Freemason, and he wrote several books on the occult knowledge, right? The subject matter in which Freemasons and other secret societies or other occult orders in which they wrestle with. They're topics of interest, right? He wrote massive books on it, great books, really solidly great books, right? And he, in talking about Freemasonry, he connects that back to Druidry, right? To the Druids in Ireland. The old priests, if you want to call it that for the sake of equating it with something that seems more understandable to our modern mind, right? The high priests, the philosophers, the theologians, the astronomers, right? The poets, the lawmakers, the judges, that kind of thing, who ruled on a par with a king, right? Who held similar status as the king. The Druids. So Manly Palmer Hall ties, if not directly back, right? As in Freemasonry now does the exact same things that the Druids done all this time ago. If not a direct link or a one-for-one account of it, he says the symbolism that is used, the rituals that are used, and the underlying philosophical understanding of these rituals, or the psychological understanding of these rituals, he said they are totally consistent from Masonry now, the whole way back to the Druids, and even to the Egyptians as well, which Masonry says that is our origin, right? And you have the obvious relationship, once you start looking at it, between Egypt and Ireland, ancient Egypt and ancient Ireland, right? Swallow de Lubitsch even speaks about this, the Egyptologist. Great books as well. Great books. The Sacred Science is one of them. And he speaks of the type of, we call it, he calls it the pharaonic way of ruling, right? So god kings to a degree. And he said that no other system in the ancient world seems to have had the type of rulership that the ancient Egyptians had, except for maybe the Druids of the West, right? So there's many, many links between these things. And if that be the case then, and if it is the case that Conor McGregor is honest in what he's saying, and he is an agent for the furthering of Irish people, the continued movement forward and existence forward in time of the Irish people, and opposing forces, as we've been led to believe, are Freemasons and many, many other organizations, right? Then having him go in, give that interview in a Freemasonic lodge is massively symbolic when we remember what Manly Palmer Hall is after saying. That the roots of modern day Freemasonry, the roots of the rituals, the storehouse of knowledge in which they hold, and the worldview and paradigm in which they operate, can be connected back to ancient Ireland, to the ancient Irish Western European system of philosophy and theology, right? So what if we delve into that then? Because overall, apart from revealing some people who don't look like honest characters now, again, we always leave the door open. Irish people all of a sudden are questioning Freemasonry and secret societies in Ireland and occulted knowledge in Ireland and secret allegiances between people in positions, and their status is being questioned, and whose loyalties are owed to who. Right, so this is really, really fascinating stuff. And there's a table full of buffet, right? There's a buffet of nutritious information there for you to pour over. Many avenues of learning that are being opened up, right? This is a fascinating topic. Now, I think I seen on a paper today that the Freemasons have come out and said that they weren't aware that that's who was doing the filming in their lodge. And if they were made aware of it, they wouldn't have allowed it to go ahead. And then, there you go, right? So they could come, people will retort to that and say, yeah, but sure, they're going to say that to cover up for one of their own, aren't they? Probably, yeah. Probably. But ultimately, we're left here in the middle, not knowing the heart of any one man, right? And understanding that there are many, many layers to any given situation. And to have one reading of a situation and to declare that the totality of it, that is the only understanding you can reach. That is zealotry. And you can, if that causes you to turn against people who you are on board with 99% of the time, then you need to have a look at yourself and reflect on that and understand that you might be missing something. You might be missing something.